So imagine you're walking into this incredibly awe-inspiring ancient cathedral.
Oh, yeah, you can almost feel the temperature drop when you walk in.
Exactly right. The vaulted ceilings are stretching way up into the shadows, and maybe the acoustics are carrying just the faint echo of a choir somewhere.
And that heavy light coming through the stained glass.
Yes, the light just feels heavy. And in that exact moment, whether you consider yourself a believer or, totally non-religious, you might feel this sudden, just overwhelming sense of peace.
Like a really profound connection to humanity.
Totally. But, and this is where it gets interesting, what if the very institution that built that breathtaking space is actually the thing slowly suffocating that exact feeling?
It is such a jarring paradox to confront, really, because you have this primordial, undeniable human hunger for meaning and community.
Right.
And yet the delivery system that was specifically designed to feed that hunger, well, it might actually be causing a kind of spiritual malnutrition.
And that tension right there, that is exactly our mission today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me back.
Of course. So for you listening, we are opening up a massive stack of critical syntheses today. We've got sociological data, philosophical essays, and they are all conducting this really cold-eyed audit of that delivery system.
Yeah, the core argument we're unpacking is highly provocative. It's basically asking, is the institutionalized version of religion, well, is it overrated compared to the actual tangible benefits it provides?
Right. And just to set our coordinates really clearly before we jump in, we are exploring these arguments as neutral guides today.
Absolutely.
We aren't taking a side. We're not endorsing secularism or, attacking any tradition. We're simply mapping out the specific critiques that modern seekers are making about the overhead cost of institutional belief.
Which is honestly the perfect place to start, because that phrase, overhead cost, that is the core tension here.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Well, the analysis we're looking at, it doesn't dismiss the human need for transcendence at all. It actually validates it completely.
Oh, interesting. So it's not saying the feeling in the cathedral is fake.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The issue is that humanity has historically conflated our deep psychological necessities, like, the rhythm of a ritual, the warmth of shared values, or just that feeling of awe. We've conflated those things with the rigid doctrinal apparatus that just happens to house them.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit because, there is a massive difference between what people actually want to experience and the bureaucratic hoops they're basically forced to jump through to get it.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how the literature completely separates the two. It describes the community, the moral framework, the contemplative the practice. All of that is the gift.
The gift, I like that.
Right. But the institution, the dietary laws, the ecclesiastical politics, the really strict rules about who you can and cannot love, that is the wrapping.
The wrapping.
And over centuries, these institutions have built what sociologists call a bureaucracy of transcendence.
A bureaucracy of transcendence. Wow, that is quite a phrase.
It really is. Basically, they act as middlemen between you and the infinite. To access the community or the awe, you have to pay this complexity tax. You have to maintain the brand of the institution.
Okay, it's like, tell me if this analogy tracks. It's like downloading a beautifully designed, super simple piece of software that perfectly organizes your life.
I'm with you so far.
But over the years, the developer keeps forcing these massive mandatory updates on you. And suddenly, you have to accept a 400-page terms of service, pay a monthly subscription fee, and navigate through like 5 pop-up ads just to open the app.
That is painfully accurate.
Right. The core code is still great, but that complexity tax just makes you want to delete the whole thing and go back to using a pen and paper.
That is a highly accurate way to look at the mechanics of it. Because think about it. When people passionately defend their faith, they're almost always defending that original software.
The human connection part.
Right. The human connection, the solidarity, the aesthetic beauty. They are defending the gift. But the institution demands that they defend the bloatware.
The pop-up ads.
Exactly. And modern seekers are simply starting to ask, hey, why can't we just have the gift?
Because when you feel that rush of awe, say, standing in a giant redwood forest, or you feel that really deep solidarity working at a local food bank, your brain isn't processing doctrine in that moment.
No, not at all.
You are just experiencing raw, unfiltered human connection. The complexity tax only comes later when someone taps you on the shoulder and says, actually, you need a membership card and a highly specific set of beliefs to keep feeling that.
Exactly. And the data shows that people are realizing they can absolutely foster ethical commitments and a profound sense of belonging entirely outside of a supernatural creed.
They're finding the awe elsewhere.
Yeah, they're finding it in the James Webb Space Telescope images or finding deep community in just secular neighborhood organizations, and they're doing it without paying that institutional overhead.
So if we realize we can get the community and the awe without the institutional packaging, why are we so historically terrified to just, hit uninstall on the bloatware?
That is the big question.
It seems like it comes down to this giant warning label slapped on the box that says, without this, you will be a bad person.
Yep, the morality argument.
Which brings us to the next major pillar that these institutions claim exclusive rights to, which is morality.
Right, what the literature calls the moral monopoly fallacy. It's this incredibly pervasive, super enduring myth that religion is the sole arbiter of virtue.
Like, if we don't have the church, we just lose our minds.
Basically, the assumption is that without the threat of divine punishment or, the promise of heavenly reward, humanity would just instantly descend into a chaotic, violent free-for-all.
But the biological and anthropological research completely dismantles that, doesn't it? I mean, morality wasn't just downloaded from the sky. It literally grew from the ground up.
It did. Empathy, cooperation, a sense of fairness. These aren't divine rules. They are biological imperatives. They are survival mechanisms that are literally encoded into our species.
Just to survive the environment.
Exactly. Think about early hominid hunter-gatherer bands. If an individual didn't share meat, or if they refused to care for the sick, they were ostracized from the group.
And back then, being ostracized meant...
It meant you were going to be eaten by a predator. You couldn't survive alone in the Pleistocene epoch. So evolution actively selected for pro-social behavior.
Wow.
Yeah, our brains developed mirror neurons that literally allow us to feel another person's physical or emotional pain. Humanity learned to cooperate and protect the vulnerable tens of thousands of years before the very first scripture was ever penned.
That makes so much sense when you frame it like that. It was just mathematically the best way to survive.
Pure survival strategy.
But looking at the critique in these essays, it goes a step further, doesn't it? It isn't just arguing that you can be good without religion.
No, it goes deeper.
It's basically arguing that relying solely on an institution for your morality can actually stunt your psychological growth. That's a pretty heavy claim.
It is, and the term used in the analysis for this is outsourced ethical judgment.
Outsourced ethical judgment. Okay.
Right. When your morality is based purely on an afterlife incentive meaning, I am doing this good thing to get a cosmic reward, or I am avoiding this bad thing so I don't burn in hell, that is a very primitive form of ethics.
It's purely transactional.
Exactly, it's transactional. True ethical life requires what psychologists call high thinking. You actually have to wrestle with competing values in a really messy, ambiguous world.
You have to do the work.
You do. And when you just follow a divine checklist that was handed to you by an authority figure, it entirely bypasses the neural pathways required for genuine moral reasoning.
Okay, I hear that, but wait, let me play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Even if it is totally transactional, isn't the sheer terror of eternal punishment a highly effective motivator to keep society functioning?
It certainly works on a lot of people.
Right. If we call it a moral crutch, well, isn't a crutch better than having no support at all and just letting vulnerable people fall over?
That's a very common defense, and it makes sense on the surface. But the sociological data pushes back really hard on that.
How so?
By pointing out that compassion and justice thrive beautifully independent of belief. You don't actually need the crutch to walk. In fact, relying on that crutch often leads to a phenomenon that researchers call certainty stagnation.
Certainty stagnation? That sounds intense. Walk me through how that actually works in the brain.
Well, faith is, by definition, belief without evidence, right?
Right.
When an institution demands absolute certainty in that faith, it acts as a neurological thought stopper. The human brain absolutely loves cognitive ease.
It's lazy.
It is incredibly lazy. It takes a massive amount of caloric energy to ask difficult questions, to adapt to new scientific realities, or, to do the exhausting philosophical work of building your own ethical foundation.
So it just shuts down.
Basically, if the institution hands you absolute certainty, the brain happily takes the easy way out and stagnates. You just stop inquiring.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting to me. Because if your brain is stagnating in certainty and you've effectively outsourced your ethics to this transactional system focused on the afterlife, well, that has to fundamentally alter your psychological relationship with the actual physical world you are standing in right now.
Oh, completely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we start to see the mechanics of what the literature calls transcendental escapism.
Right, because religion is, it is incredibly effective at offering consolation.
It's arguably its strongest feature.
Yeah. Believing that everything happens for a reason or that ultimate justice awaits in the afterlife, that is a profound psychological balm when you are suffering.
It is a profound balm, there's no denying that. But the critique outlines how that exact same comfort frequently operates as a political and social sedative.
A sedative.
Yes. Think about the biological function of anger. When you experience injustice, your brain triggers a stress response. Cortisol spikes.
You get that fight or flight feeling.
Exactly. Anger is a mobilizing emotion. It evolved to literally tell you, hey, something in your environment is wrong, and you need to physically act to fix it right now.
But if you deeply believe that an invisible cosmic judge is going to just fix that injustice after everyone dies, what happens to that mobilizing energy?
The cortisol just drops. The brain suppresses the need to act because it believes the problem is already being handled by a higher power.
Wow.
It short-circuits the healthy anger, the grief, and the civic will that are required to dismantle systemic rot right now, in the present.
That's wild.
The essays actually refer to this as the infantilization of mortality. When you treat this finite, precious life merely as a fleeting waiting room for an eternal paradise, it strips the present moment of its weight and its urgency.
Okay, to use a slightly different lens here, it's like living in an apartment building with a severely leaking roof, black mold in the walls, maybe broken heating.
Sounds miserable.
Right, but you refuse to join the tenants union or withhold rent to force the landlord to fix it because you are just utterly convinced you are moving into a luxury mansion next week.
There's a perfect analogy.
You find personal peace in the idea of the mansion. But by embracing that sedative, you are letting the people you live with get rained on today.
Yes.
You're essentially trading a better world for the promise of a better heaven.
And that raises a really critical question about group dynamics. What happens when someone in that apartment building finally looks up at the mold and says, hey, I don't think the mansion is actually coming. I think we just need to fix the roof.
How does the institution handle that person?
Exactly.
Well, based on the historical analysis we're looking at, not well.
No, not well at all. Doubt is almost universally pathologized in these systems. Questioning the narrative isn't treated as a sign of intellectual seriousness.
It's a threat.
It's treated as a spiritual contagion. The institution views it as a direct threat to the certainty that it relies on to survive. So the honest seeker is forced into this kind of quiet exile.
That sounds incredibly lonely.
It is. They either have to completely suppress their intellectual integrity just to stay in the group, or they ask the question out loud and risk losing their entire community, their family, their whole social safety net.
And when a community is willing to exile its own members just for asking a question about the roof, it stops being a spiritual safety net.
It transforms into an engine of control.
Which pulls us right into probably the most severe critique in our stack of research today, the tribalism trap.
Yeah, this is where the sociological mechanics get very dark, because religion often markets itself as this force for universal, unconditional love.
Right. Love thy neighbor.
But the psychology of group identity dictates that a group is often defined not by who is included, but by who is actively excluded. The initial spiritual impulse for connection just gets buried under these brutal us versus them dynamics.
The saved versus the damned. The believer versus the infidel.
Precisely. It taps straight into our evolutionary fear of the outgroup. And once that tribal identity hardens, the institution's primary directive shifts from spiritual enlightenment to just pure self-preservation.
Protecting the brand.
Exactly. This is the root cause of the staggering historical gap between the beautiful ideals a tradition preaches and the often horrific actions its institutions take to protect their power.
We're talking about centuries of history here.
We are. We're looking at centuries of shielding abusers to protect the church's reputation, the justification of colonial conquest to supposedly save souls, the violent suppression of scientific discoveries that threaten the dogma, and of course, the systemic marginalization of minority groups.
Now, I do have to jump in here and synthesize a counterpoint, just because we are committing to looking at this impartially.
Please do.
The historical record also explicitly shows that secular ideologies have weaponized people and caused catastrophic harm.
Absolutely.
We've seen horrific atrocities committed in the 20th century in the name of political ideologies that were entirely devoid of religion. So is this actually an inherently religious problem, or is it just what happens whenever humans build massive institutions?
It's a really crucial distinction to make. The literature fully acknowledges that institutions are fundamentally human, and human group psychology is inherently flawed.
Messy.
Very messy. And secular groups can be incredibly dangerous. However, the specific harm done in the name of religion is amplified by a totally unique factor, and that is the nature of the authority being claimed.
Right, because it's supernatural.
Exactly. When a secular government or a dictator does something terrible, they are operating under human authority.
Which can be challenged.
Right. That authority can theoretically be debated, protested, voted out, or overthrown using basic human logic. But religious institutions claim to be executing the infallible, unquestionable will of the creator of the universe.
You can't exactly vote God out of office.
You really can't. It makes the institution dangerously unaccountable. You cannot logically debate a divine mandate. The stakes are infinitely higher, which makes the potential for abuse infinitely deeper.
That is a terrifying mechanism when you really look at it. If the authority is absolute, then the tribalism is absolute.
Yeah.
So if the overhead costs are genuinely this high, if the mandatory software updates include certainty stagnation, the pathologizing of doubt, and this unaccountable tribal authority, where do modern seekers go?
It's the natural next question.
If we are tired of the bloatware, where do we actually find the gift?
Well, this raises a really important question about the future of society. The sociological data we have points toward the rapid cultivation of what the authors term secular soil.
Secular soil.
Yes, as societies modernize, the practical, functional roles that religious institutions once completely monopolized are being seamlessly replaced by secular alternatives.
Give me a concrete example of how that works at a societal level.
The most prominent examples are the Nordic models of social organization.
Oh, like Denmark and Sweden.
Exactly. Countries like Denmark, Sweden, and Norway are highly secular, yet they consistently rank among the happiest, most stable societies on the planet.
That's true.
They don't rely on religious doctrine to enforce well-being. They rely on really strong social safety nets, incredibly high levels of civic engagement, and this deeply ingrained interpersonal trust.
So they've built it into the system.
They have essentially institutionalized empathy through policy rather than through theology.
Okay, but what about on an individual level? I mean, how are people replacing the psychological comfort of sitting in a church or a temple?
Well, they are turning to evidence-based therapy to process grief, rather than just relying on the sedative of transcendental escapism.
Makes sense.
They use secular mindfulness practices to cultivate emotional resilience. And crucially, modern education, healthcare, and our legal systems now handle the roles of explaining the natural world, caring for the sick, and enforcing social order.
The church is just no longer the sole provider of these services.
Exactly. It's lost its monopoly on those functions.
But to maintain our objective lens here, we really can't ignore the counterweight in the research. The documents we're reading don't just conclude that secularism is some flawless utopia.
Far from it.
They actually acknowledge exactly where institutional religion is definitively not overrated.
Yeah, it would be completely intellectually dishonest to ignore that. The analysis explicitly identifies religion as an incredibly potent cultural technology.
Cultural technology.
Yes. For millions of people globally, it provides an irreplaceable moral scaffolding. But maybe even more importantly, it provides a narrative framework for life's deepest transitions.
You mean the rituals?
Yes. Births, marriages, the profound world-shattering grief of death. Secular life often really struggles to replicate the sheer gravity and the communal holding power of a religious ritual during those massive life events.
Yeah, that's so true, not to mention the artistic legacy.
Oh, the art is incredible.
It's undeniable that the desire to touch the divine has catalyzed some of the most breathtaking art, architecture, and music in the history of human civilization. I mean, we wouldn't have the cathedra from our thought experiment at the beginning without the institution that funded it.
Absolutely. And on a purely psychological level, the data clearly shows that in high-stress, unstable environments, we're talking places facing war, extreme poverty, or natural disaster, the toolkit of religion is unmatched.
It keeps people going.
It does. Collective hope, communal prayer, and shared ritual are highly effective survival mechanisms when human institutions completely fail.
So, synthesizing everything we've explored today, the modern critique isn't claiming that your hunger for meaning, your desire for justice, or your search for the transcendent is an illusion.
Not at all.
Those things are deeply biologically real. The argument is simply that the honest seeker deserves to know there are multiple paths to get there. You don't have to pay the institutional complexity tax if the cost has just become too high.
The overarching theme of all this research, really, is autonomy. It's about giving you the permission to separate the gift from the wrapping.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Distilling the hundreds of pages of analysis we've covered today. Institutional religion is primarily considered overrated only when it demands to be treated as the sole or the inherently superior gateway to morality and community.
Right.
It's true, functional value lies in being one optional framework among many. Whether you find your awe sitting in a quiet pew, looking through a microscope in a laboratory, protesting for tenant rights, or just hiking up a mountain, your search is entirely valid. The human connection is the point.
And as we inevitably move forward into a world that is increasingly embracing those secular alternatives, the data leaves us with a really fascinating pattern to watch out for, a final lingering thought to kind of extrapolate.
Ooh, let's hear it.
Well, we established earlier that humans are biologically wired for group identity, tribalism, and certainty.
Right. We take that baggage with us.
We carry those evolutionary tendencies with us wherever we go. So as we increasingly move toward secular spaces to meet our deep needs for belonging, is there a risk that our new secular institutions, whether they are rooted in the scientific community, political factions, or social activism, might eventually develop their own rigid dogmas?
Oh, wow. Well, we basically just build a new bureaucracy.
Exactly. Will these new secular spaces inevitably build their own exclusionary wrapping? Will they demand their own complexity tax that future generations will eventually have to critique and dismantle all over again?
That is a phenomenal question to end on. Because the drive to connect is always going to be there. We just have to be endlessly careful not to encase it in a new layer of impossible bloatware. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep seeking, and we will see you next time.